What is up? Welcome back. Whoa. I nearly fall every time I shoot an intro. Whoa, nearly went. Whoa, nearly went on our back there.
Dangerous, although this man was not serious.
Welcome back to the vlog though. We are on the way to the casino now. Jump in the main event. $1,700 buy-in. We're actually a level late because we were trying to get the last vlog uploaded before we left. But doesn't matter, you start with like 400 bigs, so plenty of chips, 40-minute levels. Can't beat the feeling day one of these large tournaments. Gonna be chunks of money up top, so let's get into it. See you at the table. What's the story, everybody? It's the Irishman here. This is day 1B of the World Series of Poker circuit event out in Calgary in Canada. It's a 1,700 buy-in. There's over 2 million in the prize pool. We're eyeing up a top prize of 360k. Hopping into day one, we jump in at the 200-400 level for 100 big blinds. The first hand of note comes from the 300-500 level, so let's get into it. Under the gun, one raises to 1k. I look down at pocket nines in the hijack. This deep and versus such an early position raise, this hand is just going to be a pure call. The cutoff calls behind and the big blind also calls. So we're going four ways to a flop. There's 4.8k in the middle and it comes down king of hearts, queen of hearts, jack of diamonds. So we don't flop too well here. We've fourth pair and a gut shot to the dummy end of a straight. If the 10 comes, any ace will beat us. So any continued aggression will probably just fold, but it ends up checking through. Turn now comes down to 10 of clubs, so it does give us the straight. We have the bad end though. Any ace is now the top end of the straight, so we could certainly be beat by an ace. Checks again to us. Now we have a decision, do we want a better call? I decide to check back just because there's three other players in the hand. The cutoff can definitely have an ace behind us, so I think if it was a heads up pot, we'd definitely start looking for value on the turn, but we're going to check it back and see what develops on the river. River now comes to 7 of hearts. It completes the flush. The original raiser bets out for 1,500 and now we have to decide, do we want to raise? Well, if we raise, what kind of hands are we targeting to call? We're looking to get called by 2 pair or a set. I think all the sets bet on an earlier street. I also think a 2 pair bets the flop, so there's not too much we can get value from, and we could sometimes be losing to an ace if he got very trappy, but I don't think he's too many aces. I think he can certainly have some bluffs, so I don't see the value in raising his hand. I don't think worse calls, but we certainly won't be folding. We toss in the call and he is king 10 suited, so he was going for some tin value himself on the river, but I don't think he would have called a raise. An aggressive player opens to 1k on the button. We look down at ace 7 of spades in the small blind with 45k in our stack. So I think with this hand, we're going to 3-bet this guy. He's opening super wide on the button. I think we're going to be playing most of our small blind strategy as a 3-bet. A7 of spades seems like a perfect candidate as a hand that we're going to want to 3-bet. So we raise it up to 4k and he flats. Flop comes down, a pretty lovely one. It comes to ace of diamonds, 7 of diamonds, 5 of spades. So we flop top 2. We're going to value bet here as we would with a lot of our range on an ace high board, but we actually have it here this time. We fire out a bet of 3k and he calls. Turn now comes to 8 of diamonds, so it brings in the flush draw and we have a decision here on whether we want to check or bet. I think versus some of the other players in the field, I just continue to go and get value from their top pairs, but this guy's really aggro. I think he can have a lot of floats here on the button, so I decide to check it over to him, hoping that he starts to bluff on the turn, but unfortunately he doesn't take the bait and he checks it back. River now comes to king of clubs, so we're going to bet here now for value. I wouldn't expect him to check back any bluffs on the turn, so we're hoping he has an ace X that we can get called by. We fire out a bet of 10k and he sends his cards pretty quickly straight into the muck. So this next hand is a pretty interesting one. There's a limp under the gun from a recreational player. The next seat over, who's a good reg, makes it 1500 to go. I look down at king queen off in middle position. I think we can go all ways with this hand. I think if the under the gun limper wasn't there, a fold is going to be fine versus an early position raise from a pretty good player. I think 3-betting as a bluff is also an option, but if we 3-bet, we're more than likely going to go heads up in a pot against early position, who's a good reg, and it pushes out the under the gun limper, who we certainly want in the pot. And then I think calling is fine because it's going to keep that player in the pot. We get to be in position post flop. So we decide on a call. The big blind calls and under the gun limper calls. So we're going 4 ways to a flop here. There's 6.8k in the middle and it comes down 9 of clubs, 3 of diamonds, 8 of clubs. So we flop 2 overcards here. We do have some backdoor straight draw potential. So when it gets checked to us, I think I like firing just a small bet here. If we take it down on the flop, happy days. If we go to a turn, we can certainly bluff on certain runouts. A king and a queen should probably give us the best hand. So we fire out a small bet at 2k. Only under the gun calls, the original limper, and we go heads up to a turn. Turn now comes to 10 of spades. It completes the queen jack straight. We do have a queen blocker. We're now drawn to any jack gives us a straight, and we have the king queen straight, which we can outpip some queen x straights if we are behind to a straight. So when it gets checked to us again, I think we're going to continue bluffing. I don't think this type of player is the type of player to just check call with 2 clubs out there with a set if they limped 3s, 8s or 9s pre. So pretty confident we have the best hand. Even if they had a hand like 9-8 suited, I would expect to see raises on the flops when we're 4 ways with a flush draw out there. So we're going to continue to put the pressure on. We fire out a bet of 5.5k and the player calls. So needing some help here going to the river. But that's not what arrives. It comes to 10 of diamonds pairing the top cards. So the board now reads 9 of clubs, 3 of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 10 of spades, 10 of diamonds. She checks it over to us again, and I decide here, I think we're going to continue with the bluff on this hand. I think one of the advantages of this hand is we can fold out some ace highs that are beating us if they're just check calling with an ace high flush draw, which seems likely as one of the main hands they can have that takes this line. I also think we can put a lot of pressure on a hand like 9x's, which is going to have to fold. I think we would have heard from Queen Jack on the turn. Given all of these reasons, I think this is going to be a fine hand to bluff. I think we're going to have some strong hands here like Queen Jack, maybe some full houses. So we're going to want some bluffs to balance that. This seems like a good candidate. We do block the Queen Jack straight. And we also don't have a club in our hand to block any of the flush draws. So I think if we bet big enough, we should be able to get a fold here. So look over at her stack and see she's only playing about 22k behind, slightly over a pot size bet. We're going to put her all in for all of our chips. See if she wants to play for them all. And pretty quickly, she lets us know that she does. We get snap called. She turns over the bad news, shows 10-9 of hearts for flop pair, turn 2 pair, and river the full house. I would have expected her to raise the turn with that hand, but I think she was probably scared of Queen Jack. I personally didn't expect her to have that hand. There's only one combo of 10-9 suited left, so I think the bluff seems fine. I don't know, maybe it could be a massive punt. If you think it was, please let me know below. 2 hands after we just blasted off half our stack as a bluff, we look down at Queen 6 of hearts in middle position and open to 1100. We still have a stack of 26k, blinds are 300, 500, so plenty of play left. There's going to be an open from here. It's a bit on the loose side, but these Queen 6, 7 suited are going to be opens in late position. Same with King X suited, like I'd be opening a hand like King 5 suited, especially in this lineup configuration. The button calls, small blind calls, and the big blind calls. So we're going 4 ways to a flop here. It comes down 2 of clubs, 3 of spades, 5 of hearts. So we flop 2 overcards, a gut shot, and a backdoor flush draw. There's going to be plenty enough to keep betting after it's checked to us. We bet out 1100 again. Using a really small size here, multi-way, seems fine. The button calls, the small blind folds, and the big blind calls. So we're going 3 ways to a turn. It comes down an absolute gin one. It comes to 4 spades. So we turn our straight. Also, any aces now the bottom end of us. This has turned into a really nice situation for us here. It gets checked to us again, and we bet out 5.5k into 8k. Hoping someone has an ace or a set that will call us. I would expect a set to raise on the flop, so we're targeting a lot of ace X. We can win a big pot versus them. Over pairs might hang around once more, but I don't think so if they think I'm going to be opening a lot of ace X here. The button gets out of the way and the big blind calls again. So we're going heads up to a river. It comes to 3 of clubs. So now we do lose to some full houses, but I would have expected any sets to raise on the flop. So when he checks to us again, I'm just going to put him all in for his remaining 18k. There's 19k in the middle. He's just slightly less than pot behind. I think if he has an ace, he'll never fold because he expects to be chopping way more than me actually having a 6. So we stick him all in. He calls pretty quickly, turns over ace jack. We show him it's no good and send him to the rails. After a pretty card dead couple of orbits, we look down at ace king. The blinds are 501k. We open to 2100 in late position. Folds to the small blind. He's an aggressive reg. He puts in the 3-bet to 7.4k. So I think depending on the player here, we can either shove or we can 4-bet. I think against this particular player who is going to have quite a bit more 3-bets than the average player, he's going to have way more bluffs. I like putting in a small 4-bet here with hands like aces, kings, sometimes with queens, ace king sometimes, and then we can just rip our like 10s and jacks and ace queens. So we click it to 18k. He tanks for a long time before eventually putting in the call. Flop comes down queen 6-3 rainbow. He checks to us. We've just less than pot behind. We're just going to stick it all in. I think we can put him in a tough spot with his hands like pocket 8s, pocket 9s. Generate folds now. If we are behind, we do have 6 outs. And we might generate some more folds from a hand like pocket 10s than we would have. Had we just shoved pre, he might just call. Where when it comes queen high and my ace queens get there, maybe some king queens if I 4-bet as a bluff, he might be more likely to fold them hands. It's a bit nitpicky. We could easily just shove pre-flop, but we stick in the remaining of our chips. He puts out the snap call, shows us the bad news. Pocket kings, we're going to be needing some help here, but help does not arrive and we get sent packing. So after busting out a day 1B, we're not discouraged. We're jumping back in, firing another bullet. Day 1C, let's go. Because the queues were so big, everyone at the table bought their ticket for 1C the day before, meaning half the table weren't there when we sat down. It's 100, 200 with a 40k starting stack and a 200 big blind ante. First hand and no, we look down at queen 5 of hearts in the cutoff. This is generally going to be open in the cutoff, but given the fact that small blind and big blind are not at the table, there's 2 dead blinds to go after, so we would be opening here extremely wide, way wider than you'd normally see. We open it up to 600 and the button calls. He also should be pretty wide here because he gets to play in position and he's defending both the blinds, seeing as they're not at the table. Flop comes down, ace of spades, 10 of spades, 6 of hearts. So we don't really flop too much here. We do have a backdoor flush draw and a backdoor straight draw. Definitely enough for us to continue firing. We lead out with a bet of 800 into 1500 and he sticks out the call. Turn now comes to jack of diamonds, so we pick up a gut shot. Think we're going to continue firing here. We can start to fold out a lot of pocket pairs. He's going to be pretty wide with the hands he defends here. He would have 3-bet a lot of his strongest hands, so overall we're going to have a big nut advantage on this board. We fire out a bet of 2k with intentions of blasting the river again if he calls, but he gives it up and we take down the first pot of the day. Next hand and note, we're still at the 100, 200, 200 big blind ante level. There's no guy in middle position. He raises 3x to 600. We look down at a pretty powerful hand, ace king off. We're going to want to re-raise this here, get some more money in the pot where we more than likely have the best hand. We're in the small blind, so we're out of position, and we're also 200 bigs effective, so we're going to want to size up here. We re-raise to 3k. We could even probably go slightly bigger given how deep the stacks are, but we go with a size of 3k and he decides to call. Flop now comes ace of hearts, king of hearts, 9 of hearts. So we flop top 2 pair. Still a bit of a dicey board though. We're far from the nuts. There's a bunch of flushes out there. So we're going to continue with our entire range on this board for a small sizing. We go with a quarter pot sizing of 1500 and he very quickly clicks it up to 5k. So from this player, I wouldn't expect him to do too much bluffing. Maybe his only bluffs come from a hand like queen jack with the queen of hearts, stuff like this. He could certainly have some flushes now. He could have a set of 9s. So we don't want to play for stacks this deep. We're far from the nuts. We're going to flick in the call and see what happens on the turn. Turn now comes to 10 of hearts. It completes the 4-liner to a flush. So any heart is now a flush. We check it over to him, hoping he bets small or checks it back. I wouldn't expect him to check back any queen of hearts, but he can certainly check back some hands like 6, 7 of hearts, 7, 8 of hearts. Flop flushes that get very much downgraded on this turn. He tanks for a couple of seconds and eventually decides to check it back. River now comes the king of spades. So we make a full house. This is an absolute dream for us here. We're going to want to bet massive, given the fact we don't think this player is doing much bluffing on the flop. He can have a bunch of strong hands. We're hoping he has the queen of hearts, but I would expect that to barrel the turn. He could also have a full house, maybe a hand like pocket nine. So we want to go massive. We're going to use a huge polarizing size bet here. We bet 18k into 11.3, and he pretty quickly snaps it off and shows pocket nine. So pretty brutal cooler for him there. He flops a set, we flop top two, we boat river boats, and we take down a big one early in the day. The next hand to know comes from the 200-300 level. We open Jack 10 of diamonds to 800 in the cutoff before the button 3-bets us to 2k. Really small 3-bet from him in position here this deep. It doesn't allow us to fold anything. He's 3-bet to 2.5x. Everything we open is going to call, bar the very bottom of our range. Jack 10 of diamonds is definitely way better than a lot of that. It can make a lot of good hands post flop. We're going heads up to a flop here, and it comes down ace of diamonds, queen of clubs, 5 of hearts. So we flop a good shot to the nuts here and a backdoor flush shot. We check it over to him, and he fires out a bet of 3k into 4.8k. So pretty big sizing from him here, but given that I think this player is a recreational player, I think he doesn't have enough bluffs. He probably has some pretty strong hands here. We're getting a good price. We're getting good implied odds. If we call and hit our king, he can have a lot of very strong hands that we just get to stack him. So we're going to hang around, see if we can turn some equity or turn the straight. Turn now comes the 8 of spades, so we pick up a double gutter now. We've a double belly buster, and he 9 also gives us a straight. There's 10.8k in the middle. We check it over to him again, and he fires out the same bet at 3k, which is pretty unorthodox. So I would have expected him to size up with a lot of his good hands. I still think he's way more likely to have a strong hand. And I think this hand could sometimes be turned into a bluff, but I just think versus this player, he does have probably some form of ace-x, maybe ace-king, so I don't want to start bluffing into a player that's probably incapable of folding top pair in these pots, so we're just going to call and try hit our hand again. We flick in the call, river now comes to 5 of diamonds, pairs the bottom card. I think we're just going to have to wave the white flag now. I don't think getting spicy will achieve anything. We just check it over to him, and to our surprise, he checks back ace-king. So he had exactly what we thought he had. If we had to hit that king, he makes 2 pair. We probably stack him for the entire lot. So we had to just call twice and then wave the white flag. Don't think we could have played any differently. I think had we got fancy play syndrome raising the turn against this particular type of player, I don't think that would have worked out well for us. We're still at the 200-300 level. We look down at ace queen off under the gun and open it up to 800. The hijack calls, the button calls, and the big blind also comes along. So we're going 4 ways to a flop here. There's 3.7k in the middle, and it comes down ace of clubs, jack of clubs, 3 of diamonds. So we flop top pair here. We should have the best hand, but there's a bunch of draws out here. We're going to want to charge people. We fire out a bet of 2k, and only the hijack calls. So we're going heads up to a turn here. There's 7.7k in the middle, and it comes to jack of diamonds pairing the middle card. Not ideal. He can certainly have a lot of jack X that call. He can obviously still have some worse aces, but we're out of position here. We're going to check it for some pot control. He decides to fire out a bet of 2.3k. Don't think we can do anything else here other than call. We can certainly still have the best hand. He could just have a flush draw, but we can definitely be behind to a jack. So we're just going to call and see what develops on the river. River now comes to queen of clubs. One of the worst cards in the deck for us. It completes the king 10 straight. Also brings in the flush. So we're not loving this situation. We check it over to him, and he bets 5.1k into 12. So a pretty small bet there relative to the size of the pot. I don't think this is just an auto call. Given this player type, he's been playing very snug so far today. Don't think he's going to bluff this size, and it's a thing that players do, especially recreational players. They just use big sizes with their bluffs. It just seems like kind of a milky bet. I think it can be a lot of jack X here. I think our combo against some really good players makes a nice hand to check raise as a bluff, blocking all the full houses, given that we should have way more of them. But against these type of players, I don't think we want to do that. Again, it'd just be fancy play syndrome. So I go into the tank for a while and eventually decide I think a fold is what we're going to have to do here. It looks bad. We do have 2 pair. It's a tough spot, but given his size, it just seems super milky. We need him to be just turning a random hand like pocket eights into a bluff, and given he's the hijack and on the flop he has button and big blind behind him, I don't think he calls any of those hands. So I also don't think he's just going to value bet a hand like ace 10, because what is he trying to get called by? So we have to make the discipline lay down here. It feels painful. We don't like to make folds, but I think we're just going to let this one go. We ask him to show, but he shakes his head, tells us you have to pay. You have to pay the man to see the cards, so we're not going to find out. But I think this is probably the correct fold versus this. Blinds are now up to 200, 400. Under the gun opens to 1k. We call in the cut-off with king, queen off. Small blind comes along and the big blind decides to get out of dodge. Flop comes down, king of hearts, five of hearts, three of diamonds. There's 3.8k in the middle. The small blind checks. Under the gun checks, so I wouldn't expect under the gun to check many strong king X here, so we more than likely have the best hand. We're going to fire out a bet for value. We fire 1.5k. The small blind stays in, and the under the gun leaves us to battle it out ourselves. Turn now comes to two of clubs. There is some straights that get there, but I wouldn't expect small blind to have any. We're going to continue to fire. Once he checks to us, we have a pretty strong hand here. We can get called by some flush draws, worse king X. We fire a bet of 4k into 6.8k, and he decides to call again. So I think he has either king X or a flush draw, hoping not to see a heart on the river, but that's not what comes. The two of hearts falls on the river. He checks to us pretty quickly again, and this is where I think I made a mistake. I expect a lot of players, especially fun players, they like to lead out when they hit their flushes. So in my head I was thinking, I think you can certainly still have some flushes, but it definitely takes out a few of them. Now I think he also still has a lot of king X that he calls in the small blind, and me, being the man I am, I just have to try squeeze out some value. I fire about a 5k into 14.8. He looks at me, laughs. I must be sitting there with blonde hair and sunglasses like Dog the Value Hunter. He raises it up to 12k, and now we're in another tough spot with top pair. I think we've been disciplined already today. I don't think this guy takes this line ever as a bluff. People just under bluff so much in live poker. It saddened us again. We're going to have to fold top pair. We let it go, and thankfully this time he shows us queen eight of hearts for a river flush. So going for value on the river definitely costs us there, but I think in the long run I like always looking for some value. We could have saved 5k there. He took us for an extra 5, but nothing we can do. I don't mind how I played the hand. I think I just have to go for value on all these spots all the time. It would pain me to check back top pair and him to roll over a hand like king jack or king 10. So not too much we could have done. Maybe we could have checked, but happy we made the disciplined fold at the end. We're now at the 300, 500 level. We look down at ace jack of spades under the gun and open to 1200. The hijack calls, the cutoff calls, and the big blind also calls. We're going four ways to a flop here, and it comes down a very good one. It comes the ace of diamonds, ace of hearts, nine of diamonds. So we flop trips. We're going to continue here with a small size in which we do multi-way. I think we could have deviated here and fired big. No one's going to pick up on that. We're going to just go bigger with our value. But in game, we ended up going with the quarter pot sizing. I think given there's a flush shot out there and someone could certainly have a worse ace, we made a mistake here. We should have certainly sized up. The hijack folds and the cutoff decides to raise to 3,300. So a pretty small raise. It's like 2.5x. The big blind folds and it gets back to us and we have a decision. I think sometimes, now that I look back at it, we should have probably put in another raise, because I think ace queen or ace king are going to 3-bet pre, more than likely. I know we did open under the gun, so maybe ace queen flats some of the time, but it makes sense that if he has a worse ace, we're just getting way more money in the pot now, and if he has a flush draw, he's probably not going to fold either. So I think in game we made a mistake by just calling, but anyways, that's what we ended up doing. We call the 3.3k and go heads up to the turn. Turn now comes the 10 of diamonds, brings in the flush draw, so not a great card if he did have a flush draw and we're now behind. We check it over to him and he decides to check back. So now I think he's very likely to not have a flush. He's never going to raise the flop as a bluff with a flush and then check the turn, especially when I very likely could have three aces. So I think we can eliminate a lot of flushes from his range. River now comes to 4 diamonds, brings a 4-liner to a flush in. I think now, if you know me by now, you're going to know what happens next. I think generally people would check here, but I fucking love value. So I need to just squeeze out every bit of value that I can. We fire a bet of 4.5k into 12.2. He pretty quickly calls. We turn over our hand and he mucks. So think picked up a nice bet here. It worked out for us going for thin value. Probably had an ace that obviously didn't have a diamond. He would have had enough of them that I think it makes the value bet fine. I think if we just think we can get called by worse, we're going to just fire out the value bets. People call too much, so we picked up a nice little pot here on the river. We could have missed out on that value. The next hand now comes from the 300, 600 level. We've 60k in our stack. Under the gun limps and we look down at ace jack off in middle position. We're going to raise here to isolate this player. Generally, people who tend to limp under the gun aren't the best players, so we make it 2k to go and he calls. So we're going heads up to a flop here. There's 5.5k in the middle and it comes queen jack 5 with one club. We flop second pair here. After he checks to us, I think we're just going to check this one back. We have plenty of showdown value here. We're not going to get 3 streets with second pair, so this makes sense. It's a good hand to check back. Turn now comes the jack of clubs. It brings in the flush draw, but also gives us trips. So we're very happy with our hand right now. He fires out about a 2k into 5.5. We're not going to let him see the river that cheaply. We have trips here. Top kicker. We're going to want to get money in the pot as soon as possible. We raise to 6.5k and he pretty quickly calls. River now comes to 3 of diamonds, so the flush misses. There's 18.5k in the middle. We're going to bet here for value. It all comes down to what size do we want to use. We end up over betting 23k. I think this was a mistake given the fact that when he checks the flop and then leads out small on the turn, I don't think he can have that strong of a hand. He limped under the gun. I don't expect him to have any monsters. So we're hoping that he also has a jack, which maybe does make sense to go that big and target these hands. But maybe a smaller bet works better because we might get him to hero call us with some random pocket pair. And it also lets him hang himself with a worse jack. I think that could have been the better play because he folded pretty quickly. So we might have went too big here. We might have went too greedy. So unfortunately, we didn't get any value on the river. But still, it's nice to be winning pots. Our stack is slowly growing up and up and up. The next hand's from the 300, 600 level. I open pocket fours to 1200 in middle position. The next seed over, a young aggro guy 3-bets to 3300. The button calls behind and I call. We're hoping to set mine here. Flop comes down 837 rainbow. We check it in flow. The aggro young guy decides to bet 4k on the flop. The button folds and now I think we're going to peel one here. Given the fact with how aggro he is, I think he's just going to bet most of his range on this flop. We can certainly have the best hand. It's one of the better flops we can hit without seeing a 4. So we're going to call and see what develops on the turn. Turn now comes an offsuit deuce. We check again in flow and he decides to check back. Interesting that he checks back because I don't think he'd ever check back any of his overpairs. I think he'd continue to keep going for value. It's such a brick turn, so interesting that he decides to check it back. He may check back some overcards and hope to hit the river, so I'm feeling pretty confident now that we could have the best hand. River now comes a king. Pretty bad card. Now all of his ace king and his king queens get there. We check it over to him again and he fires out a bet of 10k. Initially I thought about folding, but then I thought about his check on the turn eliminates a lot of the overpairs that he can have. So if we take out all of them for value, he's going to now have hands like ace king, ace queen, king queen, maybe some hands like king jack suited, king tens, bunch of these hands that he 3-bets pre. He knows that the river's good for his range, so I wasn't surprised to see him fire. But given the price we're getting, I think we're going to be good against the ace queens, the other bluffs that don't contain a king enough at the time. Yeah, I know sometimes we're going to call and just lose to ace king, but I think this guy definitely is going to bluff at the frequency we need to make this call profitable. We close our eyes, flick in the 10k, and he turns over ace queen off, and we win with our 4th pair. So nice to win that pot there, making a hero call on the river. I think versus other players I would have just folded, but against a young aggro guy who's shown to be pretty active at the table, I think we can certainly make this call, especially when we know that the overpair shouldn't be there now, so his range is all his high cards that miss and then a couple of them that hit the king, and that makes it so there's well enough hands that we can be profitable against with a call. So happy with how we played the river there. I think it just shows how you deviate your strategy, especially in tournaments, based on who the villain is. To some players you'd always call, some players you'd always fold. So nice that the hero call worked out in this case. We're still at the 300, 600 level. The hijack opens to 1400. The small blind flats and I look down a queen jack off in the big blind. Clear the fend here. We toss in the call and we're going three ways to a flop. Flop comes down ace 9-2 with one diamond. Pretty dry flop here. The small blind checks. I check and hijack checks it back, which is interesting. I would have expected to see a lot of bets on a flop like this, especially versus the blinds. Turn out comes the 10 of diamonds, bringing in a flush draw, but more importantly, giving us an open-ended straight draw. The small blind checks. I think we're going to start bluffing now. I don't think the hijack would have checked back many ace-x on the flop, so we're going to start to bluff with this hand. We can turn an 8 or a king for a straight. I think also a queen or a jack can be good for us, so we have a ton of outs here. We fire out a bet at 2500. The hijack gets out of the way, and the small blind calls. Going heads up to the river, and it comes down an offsuit 4, so the flush misses. Small blind checks to us again, and now I think this is a must bluff here on the river. I think the small blind would 3-bet their best aces out of the small blind, and I don't expect them to check the turn with a good ace. So their best hand in my head is likely to be some sort of 9x, and I think with a decent sized bet here, we can take them off this hand. We size up 2/3 pot and bet 6,600 into 9.8k. Small blind goes into the tank for about 20 or 30 seconds before flicking in the call. That's not good news for us. We know we have the loser. We turn our hand over and the small blind turns over ace-8 off for top pair. So interesting there that they called the small blind with ace-8 off. I would have folded pre myself personally, and interesting that they checked the turn. They end up getting paid, but we would have blasted off regardless. But I didn't think that they'd have many ace-x as played. They managed to catch us bluffing, caught our hand in the cookie jar, but no harm done. We're still at plenty of chips in this tournament. In this next hand, we're in the small blind. The young aggro reg is in the big blind. It's 300, 600. We look down at jack 3 off in the small. I don't think I want to limp this hand. We're going to limp fold, but we play a lot of raises in the small blind, so we can certainly raise trash hands like this. We raise 3x to 1800 and he calls. Flop comes down 10, 8, 9. So we flop an open ender here. I think we're going to continue with a small bet. We'd continue betting small with a lot of our range here. We fire out a bet of 900 and he decides to call. So going heads up to the turn here, the 6k in the pot, and the turn comes another 8. So it pairs the 8. So I think we can go two ways. We can check or we can continue bluffing. In game, I decided to check, get a bit more information from his hand, see what he decides to do. I think we can mix in some check raises too. He decides to fire out a bet at 2k, so 1/3 pot. So pretty small bet from him here. And if we think about these blind on blind situations, I would expect this player to 3-bet hands like 8s, 9s and 10s pre, so we shouldn't have sets. He can certainly have trip 8s, but I would also expect trip 8s to bet a bit of a bigger sizing with so many straight draws out there. There is some straights already. Queen Jack is a flop straight. So when he bets small, in game I was thinking, I think he has a lot of weak 10x, weak 9x that just wants to protect, get some value, doesn't want to let me see the turn too cheaply. I think Queen Jack re-raises pre at some frequency. Big blind is going to do a lot of 3-betting versus small blind open. So we decide to turn our hand into a bluff and raise to 7k. He thinks for a minute and flicks in the call. So we're playing a bloated pot here. We're getting out of line with jack 3 off. There's 20k in the middle and the river comes an offsuit 6. So now any 7 is a straight. I think we're going to bluff this hand here. We've only jack high. I think he does have a lot of weak 10 and 9x we can get to fold. Obviously, I don't expect an 8 to fold too much, but I think we can get it to fold if we put enough pressure. We fire out an overbet of 25k into 20k to send them deep into the tank. I think we want to use a very polar size in here. We're repping essentially Queen Jack and full houses. We've way more full houses than he should have as played when he flats pre. I think we also should have more Queen Jack. I think he probably calls Queen Jack a decent amount of time, but also is going to mix in some 3-bets. So given we've all these nutted hands, this hand also blocks him having Queen Jack. I don't think a 7 folds that often, but that's not the hand we're targeting. I think he might also bluff a 7 to a bigger size on the turn if he just has an open ender himself, and he might even check it back considering that he's drawn to the dummy end. So I don't expect to see too many 7s. After a while in the tank he flicks in the call. We turn over our bluff and he turns over Queen Jack. So we flopped the nuts. We didn't really put on it how the hand played out, so unfortunate. This could have been a big punt. The NFL have called me for the Super Bowl next Sunday. They need a punter, or it could have been a nice bluff. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this hand. Did you think I just punted off most of my stack? Do you like the bluff? Let me know what you think. We've got our stack back up to about 40k. Blinds are now 1k, 1500. An old guy makes a 3.3k under the gun, and the next seat over 3 bets to 10k off a 25k stack. This looks super strong, especially when an old guy opens under the gun and gets 3-bet. We look down at pocket kings in the small blind. Pretty happy with this situation. Obviously, sometimes we might run into aces, but given our stack, we've only 33 bigs. We're pretty happy to get it in with the kings here. I'm for certain someone behind is going to call. We stick in our stack. Under the gun folds, and the original 3-better calls and turns over pocket 10s. So we're off to the races here, and let's see if we can hold.
2-5.
Poker's such a crazy game at times. Very next hand after the king's hand where they'll pocket aces. We went from the second strongest hand in poker to the strongest hand. Let's see if we can win a big pot here. Under the gun opens to 3.3k, and I may get 8k on the button. He calls, and we're going heads up to a flop. Flop comes down 6-5-2 with 2 clubs. Not the best board for our hand, but he was under the gun, so I shouldn't connect with him too well either. He checks to us, and we continue with a bet of 5k. Turn now comes to 8 of clubs, and he decides to shove his last 20k all in the middle. We're not folding here. Even if these were red aces, we wouldn't be folding. If we are somehow behind, we have the ace of clubs as backup, but I wouldn't expect him just to pile in a flush. He turns over his hand, king queen off with the queen of clubs, so we have him absolutely dead. The river is irrelevant. We got him to stick in his chips, dead. Always a great feeling in poker when we don't even have to sweat the river. Poker tournaments are such a crazy roller coaster. After having an up and down yo-yo day, we somehow get kings and aces back to back and find our stack back up to 128k. Next hand coming straight back off break. Early position opens to 5k at blinds, 1500, 2.5k. So a min raise. We look down at ace jack off on the button. We're going to 3-bet this hand here. We 3-bet to 14k, and he calls. Going heads up to the flop here. Flop comes down ace queen 8 rainbow, so we flop top pair here. I think generally we're going to do a bunch of small betting, but I don't mind once in a while checking back some of our weaker ace x just for some protection. I think especially early position versus button, it's nice to sometimes check back some of these hands on the flop, so we decide on a check back just for some pot control and see what develops on the turn. Turn now comes to jack of hearts, bringing in the heart flush draw. He checks to us again, and we're going to start looking for some value now with our 2 pair. Going to use a bigger size in here. We bet 14k. Hoping he looks us up with a worse ace, maybe a hand like king queen. He can have some flush draws now on the turn, so we're expecting we'll probably get called here a decent bit, but I think we should have the best hand. River now comes to 4 of diamonds. He's less than pot behind. I think we're going to just go all in here, try get max value, but we get snap called and unfortunately run into king 10 of diamonds for a turned straight. If we bet the flop small, he still probably calls. He played it really well. He just went check call, made us hang ourselves with the 2 pair. I don't think I would have done much different. It's a 3-bet pot. It's hard not to go for it all on the river with 2 pair. Unfortunate to just run into the stone nuts, and just like that, after getting our stack back up, our stack is now decimated again. After getting decimated in that pot, the floor man comes over, our table gets broke. If he only could have came over about 2 minutes before, we would have been fine. It's all his fault. We find ourselves at a new table with 8.5k. We've like 4 bigs. First hand, we look down at ace jack of hearts, stick it in the middle. Fella rejams behind us, and we're going off to the races.
Nice one. Now he's filming. Keep it low, low. Oops. 4.
Hard for a sweat.
Nope. 6 of clubs. Nice hand.
Couple of hands later, after doubling our puny stack into a short stack, we're all in again pre-flop with the Cowboys versus ace 10. Let's see if we can hold.
Hey, yeah. Wow, nice hand. That qualifies as a bad call.
One pin.
Kings. 20.
After another table change, we find ourselves with a 50k stack. Blinds are 1500 3k. We look down at pocket trees on the button. Good enough to jam all in here. Hopefully pick up the blinds. The big blind calls, and now we're just hoping we're a flip. He turns over his hand. It's good news. It's not a pocket pair. He's got ace king. We need to win a race here to get us back up to a 100k stack. It'll be a very playable stack if we can hold. So let's see if the dealer's good to us.
45. Okay. You want the river first? Yeah. Okay. Everything around there. Oh.
There's about 8 minutes left of late reg on day 1C. It's our final chance. We decide to fire one more bullet. We're now into this tournament for $5,100. There's over 2 million in the prize pool. We need to spin up a stack. Blinds are 1500 3k. We start with 40k. We win one hand to bring us up to 50k before we play this one. We look down at king queen. We open to 6k, get a call on the button, and the big blind calls. We're going 3 ways to a flop here. Flop comes down king jack 7 with 2 spades. It gets checked to us. We fire out a bet of 8k. We're going to be playing for stacks here. The button calls, and then the big blind decides to shove. We can't do anything here with our top pair. There's such a wet board. Queen 10 is an open ender. There's a bunch of flush draws. The button doesn't have that much in a stack, so big blind can be pushing here super wide. We stick in the rest of our stack. Button folds, and we get the bad news. We're going to need some help here. We're up against king 7 of diamonds for a flop 2 pair. This bullet might only last a couple of minutes. Let's see if we can get there.
Raise 35,000. That's all.
Right, so thanks for tuning in if you made it all the way to here. I know this was a long stint. We fired 3 bullets in the tournament. No joy. Didn't find a bag, which is disappointing, but that's how tournaments go. Lots of variance. We fired off $5,100 into the tournament. A net loss of $5,100 in the tournament. But happy for how we played with most, with bar a couple of hands. Tournament variance is obviously wild. Obviously the last bullet we jump in for like just under 20 bigs, so that's always going to be a spin. If you enjoyed watching tournaments, let me know. I'll try to get some more on the vlog. We have some big plans coming up in the next few months. Thanks for sticking with us. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you soon.